And the first one is, when engaging with the natural world, do you feel it observes you as much as you observe it? During walks, rituals, or meditations in nature, do you sense that the trees, rivers, or animals are aware of your presence? If the natural world holds a consciousness or spirit, how might this mutual observation shape your spiritual practices or your understanding of reverence?
Well, a lot of questions there. The arrogance of assuming you're the only subject and everything else is an object, that doesn't really work.
You would have trouble thinking they were objects if you were not able to interact with them.
Well, I don't know, but I have tried that point of view, and I find it very pleasant and sort of freeing, but I don't remember to consider it often enough. I really like it, and when I accept that that may be what's going on, it feels really good. And of course, it makes perfect sense too.
Well, every now and then I will encounter a creature that's watching me.
Yes, that's nice.
And next thing that comes to mind is to think of there are maybe many creatures I don't see who are watching me.
Mm-hmm.
All of the little bitty ones.
Yeah, and that's just the watching, because there are those who know my sound or scent,
Right.
Who are also just as aware of me as those who can see me.
Well, there's some things you have trouble when they're watching you. You're not too happy that they're watching you.
They're not too happy, yes.
Like tigers.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I once had the thought, and it persists, that for some environment to really be full and full of life and lush, it needs to be known. It needs subjects, and that if there were any part of the universe that had no subjects, would it exist? You look at some of these barren places and you don't think there's anything there, but then you start looking really closely and you find these weird little critters that live there and perceive it all the time. I don't know. I just kind of suspect that for an object to exist, there almost has to be a subject. And you can always say, well, there's always God. And that's true. That can make up for when the place, is like a piece of cooling lava, nobody's living in it. But anyway, it's fascinating. It really is fascinating to consider that and to try to feel it.
We have these little bitty bugs that I can't tell whether they're flies or what, and they hop from place to place very quickly. They're all the time making erratic motions, and they're about the size of the head of a pin. And I don't know what they are. I haven't been able to find out.
Have you taken a really close look at one?
Well, I have a magnifying glass, but it would almost take a microscope, and then they won't stay still long enough to look.
6 legs or 8 legs?
Can't count them.
Okay.
I can't tell whether they're a little bitty fly or a little bitty hopping bug.
Yeah, well, I think there are 6-leggeds and 8-leggeds that hop. So,
okay.
So I mean, who knows what it is, but there are these arthropod creatures that do a great job of hopping.
Yeah, these silly things, they're all the time hopping into whatever you're drinking. So you have to fish them out. They don't seem to bite. They don't seem to do anything that you really bother you at all.
Okay, well, let's get back to the principles here.
Yes, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Do you think those little things you're talking about are aware of you, and in what sense?
I know that they are. If you try to move your hand close to one, it disappears quickly. So I think it's aware of you.
With some degree or form of consciousness, then you're literally engulfed in it.
Right.
And really, it turns out everything is part of that. Everything is participating. I don't think a grain of sand actually has awareness, but it does respond if something touches it.
I think a grain of sand has awareness. I think everything is full of consciousness. And one definition of the divine or God could be consciousness
Yeah.
itself. And so if you say that a grain of sand is not conscious, it's by necessity leading to a separation between that grain of sand and the divine, which
Yeah.
is impossible.
It's impossible.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, okay, it's one thing to say that in principle, but how does one really come to understand that?
Well, it helps, to remember to try on the idea and
Okay. Okay.
see how the world feels different, because it does.
I think we in the West need to learn a bit from the ancient Asians, because the Chinese and Japanese had a way of basically experiencing things and not letting intellect get in the way. I think sometimes there's value in philosophy and exposition and everything, but there's also value in concision, and sometimes you can get more out of a haiku than you can a long book of philosophy. I mean, for instance, one of Basho's haiku is "Dying cricket, how full of life his song." And there's really a lot to unpack there, but it's also experience. And how many of us see a cricket and, well, essentially all crickets are dying crickets, and think how full of life its song is, Sort of like every time, someone asks, what's your favorite season? Well, autumn is my favorite season. And I don't look at it as the season of things dying. I look at it as the season of return. Because when you look at the tree and the leaves are flaming red, for me, that's them burning up in fiery, anticipation of reunion with God.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
Yeah, we really need to see things a lot of different ways, really, and not mutually exclusive. One of the things that I find the most fascinating is to look into an animal's eyes, even if it's a tiny little insect. I've sat and stared at a spider that was sitting and staring at me for a while, and it's just, it's like you look into another world. It's miraculous. It's just stunning.
It is, and again, let me return to the point that we're talking about seeing. We're talking about vision.
Any perceiving, really, but
and our vision is about that big.
yeah, true.
And that's just one of the possible dimensions of connection, of being and understanding. So it's just overwhelmingly miraculous.
Yeah. It's kind of like there's a mutuality of existence. If there were no relationship between things, could they exist? And I suspect the answer is no.
Yeah, right. No, sure, right. That's necessary. Front and back follow one another.
Yeah, it's funny. You can step out into the world, like out of your house into the open space. And are you experiencing the world, or are you co-creating it? I can't answer that definitively.
Yeah,
Well,
that's right.
what does it take for something that you consider to be an object to react to something you do or that you think you are doing? In other words, are they because they are conscious? Are they capable of reacting to anything and everything around them?
Well, not everything. I mean, look at how narrow our visual perception is, the narrow bandwidth. But if something happens in a critter's environment and it responds, either because it reacts with volition or because whatever happened, affects the critter as a passive object. But if the critter changes in any way, like having some of it rub off on an adjacent rock, or just shifting position a little bit, or
So it would seem that if that's the case, that every created being has a range of capabilities that can be triggered some way or another.
mm-hmm. Yeah, just to be physically present means that the wind can blow on you, or the sun can shine on you, and things like that. And you may or may not be able to consider that you're in a dance there's a dance going on between the two, but there's definitely a relationship, and the situation without either one of the subjects or either one of the objects, however you want to look at it, one of those critters can't not be there for the same thing to exist.
And then there's the question of whether some of its capabilities are things that you invest in it when you do something with relationship to it. In other words, is it something that's transferred from you to the object, or is it something that is inherent in the object?
Yeah, or something that is conjured up out of the object's possibilities.
That's right.
Nothing, in a certain sense, nothing is really static, and everything takes its turn being active or passive.
Right.
Lots of things spend most of their time being passive, but
Well, they can be both.
they can.
They can be both at the same time.
Yeah.
Some objects I have a great deal of control over them, and others I don't. Others seem to have their own individual behavior that, like for instance, if I'm shooting my bow and arrow, I have a sense of directing where the arrow goes based upon my intention and my ability to cause it to do that. I don't think the arrow is somehow or another deciding where it goes.
No, it's not, but it is experiencing the motion, and it's certainly experiencing the impact, because it's modified by the impact. It can't not experience in that way.
But even there's degrees of what it is capable of doing. Like how deep does it go into the whatever it encounters?
Well, yeah, there are variations, but if there's any relationship between objects, what is that? What is it that connects them?
Right.
If they're not bumping up against each other, it's something that they have in common, and let's call it consciousness. They certainly may not have the amount or the modes of consciousness that we're familiar with, but it doesn't. They have a place in the world. What would their purpose be if they weren't aware of it in some way? I sort of feel like everything exists by virtue of being known, even if I don't know it, you know?
There's things like, for instance, red ants have a range of activity that they control, but they also respond to something you do. Like they will march in an endless line between where they wanted to start from and where they wanted to end up, with no apparent intelligence as to picking their own path. But if you put your foot down there in between them, they will crawl up on top of it. Pretty soon they'll be crawling up your leg.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they'll be biting you.
They will recognize it as something that shouldn't be there in their world.
Right.
Luna, like to help us on this one?
Well, I think it's not a one-way street. We tend to think of it as a one-way street, but I think there's always this dialectic and ebb and flow between us and nature, us and animals, us and the world, us and God. And we always, even when we think of it that way, we think of the self and the other and the self. But the reality isn't either one, it's what's in between. And maybe that's just my perspective on it, but you know, you've got so much of Christian theology actually being focused on either the Father or the Son. And in my view, the most important part is actually the Holy Spirit. It's the glue that binds it together. Essentially, what you've got in Christianity, what you've got in Hinduism, what you've got in certain forms of Buddhism, this kind of threefold vision of the divine, is simply a geometric way of looking at reality. It's dialectics, the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis. You know, God is the thesis, a manifested being is the antithesis, and reunification and oneness with the divine is the synthesis. But you can have in this world on a day-to-day basis an experience of synthesis with everything.
Yeah.
Because of that glue that holds things together. There's the divine or the Holy Spirit or whatever you want to call it, pulsing through everything at every moment in time. And so if you stop thinking and stop pondering and just experience, you can realize that this veil of separateness between you and the tree or between you and the water is actually just an illusion on a certain level. But on another level, it is there, but you can experience the tree as a tree. And scientists and Western thinkers tend to view a tree, as it is or as its parts, but there's a certain way of just experiencing treeness. I mean, the poet R.S. Thomas, someone asked, did you ever have a mystic experience? And he said, the only time I ever had a mystical experience was when I shut up and stopped thinking about having a mystical experience and just sat down next to a tree and was looking at the birds and experienced the bird as a bird and the tree as a tree.
Yeah, all the things that happen, in what do they happen? There must be a shared medium, or there'd be no awareness between the two.
Yes, but they were all mystical experiences.
Yes, that's right.
They were all mystical experiences.
Yeah. I mean, experience itself is mystical.
That's right. That's right. Indeed.
We don't know what is. We only know what we experience.
And that's everything.
Mhm.
Are we losing George? No.
Yeah, I don't know what this happened. It's already decided it wants to do something.
Well, shall we move on?
Yes, let's move on. What role does your body play in your spiritual experience? Many traditions view the body as a vessel, a temple, or even a microcosm of the universe. In your practice, whether through mindful movement, stillness, or sensory awareness, how do you see the body participating in spiritual truth? Is it a bridge to the divine or merely a temporary habitation for the soul?
Well, it seems to me, at least, that there are levels of understanding or being affected by things that are, like, for instance, you can ascend to a spiritual consciousness of the divine. That is probably about the highest level of the human that humans can experience.
Well, Luna, you've been reading my site.
Yes.
For instance, the revelation of a tradition, the revelation of a tradition comes from a higher level of consciousness than does a lower one, like just the awareness of time and space, or the awareness of spatial, non-spatial consciousness, but not necessarily spiritually, not integrated into a something spiritual. So, I mean, all of those different levels of understanding, all the way from pure consciousness, which I think is conscious of all of the things that we've been talking about, or can be, at the same time.
Well, let me chime in here. I think for most people, I think the vast majority of people, the body has an element to play in their spiritual life. And that's why there is necessarily a ritual element in all of the practices of all of the great traditions. And really one of the problems of the modern era is that there are so many approaches to knowledge. And I'm thinking of a lot of the things that might be called New Age, that are in their own ways legitimate, but incomplete and ineffective because they don't include the whole person. And part of the whole person is the body. And we have a body, and it can either hold us back or help us along.
Yeah, the body is something that, as long as we're associated with it, it's an experience. It experiences itself and regulates itself and everything. And the thing we call a body is really just our sensation of it.
Yes, that's kind of a deep understanding of it, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, we see its form, we experience the world through it, but it really, our knowledge of it is only our experience of it, and is very valuable because it seems to be necessary for a lot of the experiences.
Well, and two, the levels of experience, what I was talking about, are different. In other words, you have that lowest level of the corporeal world where you only experience its externalities, I guess you might say.
Or at least that's what you think you're experiencing.
Right. But you don't really have any sense of its consciousness.
Wait a minute, what is it that's experiencing that? That's the question.
And where does experience take place?
Yeah.
The body is sort of like the locus of our experience, if we want to think of it spatially or as having a location. The body is a body.
There's a lot of experiences of things that are not located or locatable. And those experiences may be, well, we gave examples of things like music, for instance.
Yeah, and emotion.
You cannot locate, and thinking, for that matter, cannot be if it's limited to thinking alone, cannot really be located.
No.
But to some extent, it is associated with an experience in a way.
It
But
is.
So I can go through a piece of music in my mind, note by note, without really knowing that they have any particular location.
Yeah. Yeah, they're in awareness, whatever that means.
Right.
It's the expression we use. But are they in it, or are they inseparable from it? I mean, it's all one.
Well, another thing that's kind of interesting, you can have 2 or 3 pieces of music going at once that seem to kind of interfere with each other. It's hard to follow one or the other, but you really don't have any real sense of location for any of them.
No. Mm-mm. And you can adjust your attention to focus more on one of them.
Yes, exactly.
The foreground, but that's just in the nature of experience and the kind of consciousness we have.
Well, my feeling is that there's a level above that in which you are conscious of everything, if you care to be conscious of it, but it's beyond location.
Well, even location is an experience of consciousness.
Right. And you might associate it with an object, like you know, for instance, that a kettle drum makes a certain kind of noise.
Well,
but it doesn't have to be any particular place to do that, or at least your memory of it.
Yeah, it helps if it has an atmosphere to propagate the sound, but other than that.
Exactly.
Okay, where are we here?
We lost the body somewhere along here, but
digressing and losing the thread as usual.
Yeah, get back to that thread. Rethread us, will you?
I think all of you started out well. But just to answer it simply, there is a body, unless you're George Barkley, and you think that the body is just a figment of God's imagination, which has a grain of truth to it. But so long as we experiencing through the body is an essential tool. Just like you wouldn't want to put nails into the wall with, I don't know, a stuffed teddy bear, you also wouldn't want to do certain things with the body that it's not meant to, and vice versa. There are certain things, just like a hammer is good for putting nails in the wall, certain thing a body is good for. And the body is good for getting awareness of reality, but also for getting lost. It has a propensity for getting lost. And so the goal is to pay attention. The goal is to be aware and to try not to get lost. And essentially, the body sometimes can ground us, and that grounding is actually a good thing. In fact, if these post-humanists actually did come up with some sort of scientific way for immortality, that would be really detrimental to the spiritual life in many respects, because sickness, death, these sorts of things actually ground us and give us awareness of certain things. And fundamentally, as it says, in the Bible, all shall be well. And, all shall be well, whatever that means, whether it's being reincarnated as a grasshopper or it's, ascending to some sort of celestial realm or whatever it is. Fundamentally, if one has a positive conception of reality, even if you don't believe that the divine has consciousness in the sense of being a autonomous subject like we are, even if your vision of the divine is more impersonal, you have to say, do you believe, as the Manichaeans do, that there's good and evil, or do you believe that there's simply good? And fundamentally, ontologically, there is only good. Evil can't exist. If there's an evil,
It's a
evil is
deprivation of
the
the
lack
good.
of existence.
It's
Right.
the deprivation of the good.
Yes.
And, and why should we ever assume anything is not the way it's supposed to be? It may not with our desires and intentions, but here it is.
Where did I first hear that argument? Was it Aquinas?
I don't know.
Yes, I'm with you there. There isn't any evil. There's only a lack of good. We call that evil.
Yeah, and anything that
it can't have its own presence.
And anything that isn't there according to our preconceptions is seen as an enemy.
Oh, true.
And of course, the devil is an enemy.
Does the devil exist?
Maybe the devil's function is to clearly point out that what we think exists doesn't.
Let me think about that.
To shatter our illusions.
Well, I have a little different take on this aspect,
Please.
which also reflects somewhat in the previous questions. I like what Parmenides implied in that evil is dealing with being from the basis of non-being.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the Platonic realm of name and form, although it gives us something to talk about, it still is not being.
Mm-hmm.
Just like we can describe the wonder of eating a strawberry, but it doesn't replace the experience of eating a strawberry. And humans have a terrible habit of overlying a direct experience with memories and comparisons of previous experiences and possible future experiences. And then that leads to all kinds of phenomenological discussions. And eventually we slip into believing that phenomenological proofs by discussion actually point directly to a direct experience, which in my case, I don't think that's so.
No, it isn't. It depends on what you mean by pointing to, but the thing we assume exists that is being pointed to isn't necessarily what we think it is.
No, it can only be lived.
Yeah.
It can't be discussed.
Yes.
Because there's nothing to discuss, which makes discussions very interesting in that to really be effective, it requires a certain amount of expertise in discussing something verbally and a certain amount of expertise and insightful noticing of what is being pointed at.
Mm-hmm.
But that's very hard for most people to maintain in the heat of the competition and the discussion.
Oh, yeah. If there's a competition, then you're caught up in the battle.
Well, there's always a competition because this discussion is a two-way street.
Oh, well, yeah, but you can think of it as a comparison rather than a competition.
Even a comparison, compare what the strawberry tasted like today versus yesterday is overlying the experience of today with the memory of yesterday.
That's true. That's true. It is. Yeah.
But people can't continue to go back and buy strawberries.
Yes. My only point is
they have the experience that they had before that they like.
Yes. Yeah. My only point was in discussing these things, it's kind of like a sword of Damocles. So what Parmenides said is being is, non-being is not.
Mm-hmm.
And that they're not the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, all prescriptive medicines are based upon the principle that certain results will occur as a result of eating the prescription, or it will get rid of certain. So
the cause and an effect.
yes, that there is some cause and effect.
Yes.
But the cause and effect isn't the discussion of the phenomenon.
Is what?
The causative effect is not the discussion of the phenomenon.
No. No, it's not.
That's right.
Well, one still expects to get a certain result when one applies a certain medicine.
Generally, what we expect, whether it's something we long for or fear, has already happened.
Yes.
Because we're referring to the past to know what it is.
Well, is it because it's already happened that it's likely to happen again?
Well,
Well, the past is already non-being, so we can't guarantee that it'll happen again.
right.
And sometimes our expectation may color what happens.
You're always buying the strawberry you ate in the past.
Maybe.
Well, in other words,
And quite frequently you have a big smile on your face because it ends up the same way.
Yeah, you remember an object that looked like that, tasted really good, and you'd like to have that repeat that experience. And if we didn't remember our previous experience, everything would, be kind of undefined. And we would experience the magic of newness all the time, which we really would be nice to have.
But we're still getting back to the point that the certain amount of discussion describes the repeatableness of an event.
Say that again.
Well, the fact that we assert certain things, we repeat them because we are likely to have an experience that is the same that they looked at to begin with. So I may have an experience that strawberries taste a certain good way, or grapes. And sure enough, I discuss that with other people and they say, yes, they have that, but if you leave them out too long and they rot, they don't have it. So there's things to discuss about the repeatableness of an event.
Well, does it repeat or just does it resonate with something we remember?
Well, we would have to have eaten rotten grapes for it to correspond to that, and we would have to have eaten perfectly fresh ones for it to correspond to that. And then we would be discussing, well, how do they get rotten and how do they not get rotten?
But the past is so fundamental for how we think about and describe, and our whole relationship with our world is mostly shaped by what we've already experienced. So it's amazing how much of our lives are in the past.
Yes, but those events, the relevance of those events are not a one-time occurrence. That's what I'm saying.
Well, they remain in the past until and even the thing that happens now is suddenly in the past.
Something that is repeatable of something that happened in the past sometimes and not other times, when different things have occurred in between, requires some discussion.
Well, yeah, but only the past tells you it's a repeat.
Well, it's not a complete repeat if it's rotten grapes instead of...
No, but even then it stands out for its difference from what we refer to in the past.
I think there's a whole variability as to the results that can be encountered in relationship to something. And you can distinguish through discussion which ones are likely to happen and which ones are not.
Yeah, but likeliness is meaningless compared to something actually happening. In other words, we're talking about a relationship that we assume exists because we've made that connection before in the past, and that's still in our memory. And so often it's exactly right on a practical level. So it's, but the
Well,
experience is always now. The definition comes out of the past.
if I'm used to eating strawberries and getting a certain kind of taste out of them, and then all of a sudden I eat one and it tastes horrible, that didn't happen in the past. That happened right now. And then I'm going to have to figure out, why did that happen right now when it never happened before?
Yes, but you judged it to be wrong because it didn't line up with the past.
Well, yes, because I'm interested in repeating something that happened in the past.
Sure,
And when
but
I find out that in attempting to do that, I run into all sorts of situations where it's not the same.
But we're always defining present experience in terms of the past, unless we're really keenly aware that that's just a sort of a mental reflex.
Well, you might say that that things happen that are indicative of a repeatable experience.
Well, do you ever really repeat the same experience?
Well, I would say that the strawberries that I ate today correspond to my memory of the strawberries I ate yesterday.
Well, there is a relationship there.
Yeah, there sure is. But then that relationship can have all sorts of variabilities in it, I think. It's not.
Well, yeah, because it's not actually happening now. It's what you remember of the past and all the associations that go along with it. I like to say the thing that I fear most has already happened, because how would I be afraid? No, I should even be afraid.
Why indeed?
And since we don't know what's really coming, we can only anticipate in terms of the past. And that denies it a certain element of newness that may be required to fully experience it. So it's just to realize that we have so many assumptions about, the things we experience and things we think about and everything. And they've all been accumulated over time. They're patterns and memories that we've observed before. And of course, they're not always accurate either. But what happens now is not the same as what happened before. You
Right.
may remember certain characters.
And it's usually associated with some reason that you can deduce or determine by discovering the difference in the way it was implemented.
Well, yeah, but some of the memory is what we've already told ourselves about it. It's just really important to remember that, the past is the past, and it's not as if we have no awareness of it or it has no influence.
Well, I'm not saying that it does.
But what's happening now,
does.
is when you think about what's happening now, you're usually comparing it with something in the past, and it's not pathological. It's just that we need to be aware that's what we're doing.
There can be a whole range of things from the past that have, you might say, legitimacy.
Yes and no. There's no real way to prove there's a past.
That's right.
Okay, I'm leaving.
The past is what we call memory. We don't really know what memory is.
That's right.
Well, this question sort of descended into question 3 about repetition, and
Yeah,
I've had about enough of that. So I'm glad all I can say is I'm glad it's not the summer, because I couldn't eat any strawberries right now.
Well, George could. He's obviously preoccupied with strawberries.
Well, do we have to have a repetition?
Well, see, I buy a whole lot of this fresh fruit, and I get different experiences of it different times. And I determined that certain things are indications that it's going to taste different and not be as good or not be so on and so forth. So there's and I'm always coming to the point of being surprised by something that I thought would be good. It's not.
Surprise
then-
is good.
What?
Surprise is good.
Yes, exactly.
Newness is good.
And it can be not so good too, depending on what you're looking for.
Yes, but it has the advantage of being fresh and being a new experience.
Fresh is overrated. Some fruits are actually most delicious when they're rotten, like
well.
medlars and Japanese persimmons.
Well,
And then
well,
some people like them rotten and other people don't. So there's also that enters into it.